You have to listen to me right now.
What? No, this can't be happening!
It is. We need to leave now.
The scream never left her throat. It stayed there, compressed behind her teeth, behind the careful smile she'd learned to wear like armor over the past 14 months. Jisuhan pressed her back against the cool surface of a perfume display, the glass bottles trembling faintly as her shoulder made contact, and she thought, he found me. He was 40 feet away. Marcus didn't see her yet. He was scanning, the slow, methodical sweep of a man who'd spent 3 years learning exactly how she moved through a crowd. That particular tilt of his jaw, the way his eyes caught on exit signs before dismissing them, she recognized all of it. She had studied his patterns the way prey studies a predator. Not by choice. By necessity. The latte department store in central Busan was packed on a Saturday afternoon. Families with strollers. Teenagers in clusters. Women carrying shopping bags that rustled like leaves. Jisoo had come here because she was supposed to be safe. She'd moved to Busan 8 months ago specifically because Marcus didn't know anyone here, didn't speak Korean, didn't know the subway lines or the neighborhoods. She had calculated the distance between herself and her old life down to the kilometer. It hadn't been enough. She slid sideways behind a pillar, her breath going shallow and quick. In her chest, her heart was doing something that felt less like beating and more like something trying to break out of a cage. She clutched her shopping bag, a birthday gift for her coworker, still unwrapped, and she thought very clearly, if I run toward the escalators, he'll see movement. If I stay still, he'll reach me anyway. I have maybe 90 seconds. Jisoo. Her name in his voice was its own kind of violence. He said it softly. That was the thing about Marcus that no one ever understood when she tried to explain it afterward. He never shouted. He never made a scene in public. He was the kind of man who could destroy you in a whisper while the whole world went about its business 3 feet away. It was why no one had ever believed her when she first tried to leave. He seemed so calm, her former friends had said. He seemed so reasonable. She turned. He was smiling. That particular smile, warm at the edges, hollow in the center. He was wearing a blue jacket she didn't recognize, which meant time had passed and things had changed and he had kept living his life while she had spent 8 months rebuilding hers from splinters. I've been looking for you, he said, moving closer. His voice was just beneath the ambient noise of the department store. Just inaudible enough that no one around them could make out the words. Deliberate. Always deliberate. You look good. You look really good. Did you think I wouldn't find you? Marcus. She hated the sound of her own voice. Small. Compressed. 14 months of therapy and she still went small when she saw him. You need to leave me alone. I drove 7 hours. He tilted his head, amused, the way someone looks when a child says something adorable and wrong. 7 hours, Jisoo. That's not the behavior of someone who wants to be left alone. That's someone who ran. I came to talk. I don't want to talk. He reached out and touched her elbow. It was the lightest possible touch. Fingertips on the fabric of her sleeve. The people walking past saw nothing. A couple having a conversation near a perfume counter. Maybe they were debating a purchase. Maybe she was showing him a bottle she liked. Nobody looked twice. But Jisoo felt it the way you feel a trap closing. Walk with me, he said. Just to the cafe upstairs. 15 minutes. No. 15 minutes, and then I'll go. I promise. He smiled again. I just need to understand why you left the way you did. You owe me that much, at least. After 3 years. The you owe me, she had known it was coming. It always came. It was load-bearing in his particular architecture of control. You owe me for the rent. You owe me for the trip. You owe me for the argument last Thursday when you made me feel like that. She looked past his shoulder toward the main corridor, calculating. The exit was too far. The crowd was too thick to push through quickly without drawing his grip down on her arm, which he would do. She knew he would do it. She had the text messages from 3 different instances of him doing exactly that in parking lots and doorways. Her phone was in her bag. She could call someone, but who? Her coworker, a woman who weighed 50 kilos and had never seen anything like this? The police, with what explanation, while he stood there smiling his reasonable smile. She became aware, then, of a stillness. Not silence, the store was still full of its usual Saturday sound. But there was a pocket of stillness in her peripheral vision. A change in the air pressure of the space to her left. She turned slightly. A man was standing near the adjacent display, approximately 8 feet away. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the cologne bottles in front of him with the relaxed attention of someone who had nowhere else to be. He was Korean, somewhere in his mid-40s, with close-cropped hair going silver at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him with the kind of precision that speaks not of fashion but of function, a man who needed to move well in his clothing. A small security badge on his lapel. Not the uniform of the regular floor guards. Something else. Something senior. He turned a cologne bottle over in his hand, reading the label. But his eyes, she realized, his eyes were not on the bottle. Marcus tightened his grip on her elbow slightly, recalibrating. Jisoo. I'm going to need you to come with me. I'm not asking again. The man in the charcoal suit set down the cologne bottle. He didn't move toward them. He simply turned his head and looked at Marcus directly. Not an aggressive look. Not a threatening look. The complete absence of expression, which is somehow more unnerving than either. Marcus blinked. This is a private conversation, he said in English, with the irritation of a man who has never once in his life been interrupted by a stranger. The man in the charcoal suit looked at him for exactly 3 more seconds without speaking. Then he looked at Jisoo. And in Korean, quietly enough that Marcus couldn't follow it, he asked, "Do you know this man?" She almost broke apart right there. Because it wasn't "Are you okay?" or "Is there a problem?" the standard, deflectable questions that people ask when they want to feel helpful without committing to anything. It was specific. Precise. A question that required her to give actual information, and that placed her in the position of the person who decided what happened next. She swallowed. "No," she said. "I don't know him." The man nodded. He looked back at Marcus. And then, this is the part she would think about for years afterward, he spoke once. 1 sentence. In English. Delivered in a voice that was not loud, not aggressive, not heated in any way. The voice of a man making a purely factual observation about the nature of reality. "You are going to let go of her arm, and you are going to leave this floor." Marcus stared at him. The whole geometry of the situation shifted in that moment. She felt it. The way you feel a current change direction in water. Marcus was used to being the most controlled person in any confrontation, used to being the one whose calm unnerved the other party. He had met his own reflection, except this reflection had authority written into the line of its shoulders, and Marcus, for possibly the first time she had ever witnessed, did not know what to do with that. His hand dropped from her arm. She became aware that she was shaking. Not on the outside. On the inside, in the deep place where the fear had lived for so long it had started to feel like furniture. Marcus smiled his smile. "Fine," he said. "Fine. I'll find another time." He turned and walked toward the escalators. Jisoo watched him go. She watched until the blue jacket disappeared into the crowd below. She watched until there was nothing left of him in her visible world. And then she pressed her hand against the glass display case and breathed, and the breath came out in pieces. The man in the charcoal suit had not moved. "He's gone from this floor," he said quietly, in Korean. "But I don't think he's left the building." She looked up at him. "How did you know?" "I watched him come in through the east entrance 40 minutes ago. He was looking for someone." A pause. "I thought it might be better to stay close." 40 minutes. He had been watching for 40 minutes, quietly, without alerting her, without interfering before she needed it. Without making her feel like she was being managed or controlled or rescued in the way that sometimes feels indistinguishable from another kind of capture. "Who are you?" she asked. "Park Sung-joon," he said. "Head of building security." He glanced once more toward the escalator. "I think we should go somewhere he can't watch you from. If you're willing." She looked at him, really looked at him, in the way you look at someone when you're trying to measure the distance between danger and safety. She said yes. And she didn't know yet that this man carried a silence that held more protection in it than anything she'd encountered in 3 years of trying to protect herself. She didn't know yet what he had seen. She didn't know yet what Marcus had already done. The Security Operations Center for Lotte Busan occupied a room on the 4th floor that most shoppers would never know existed. It looked, Jisoo thought, like someone had crossed a small police precinct with a quiet library. Banks of monitors along one wall, each one divided into a grid of camera feeds. A long desk with keyboards and log sheets. 2 junior officers who stood when Park Sung-joon entered and then returned professionally to their stations. A window that looked out over the service corridor, not glamorous, entirely functional, the kind of room built for work rather than impression. He brought her a bottle of water without asking. Set it on the table in front of her and sat down across from her, and she appreciated that he sat across rather than beside her. Space. He was giving her space. Some men do this instinctively and don't know they're doing it. She suspected Park Sung-joon knew exactly what he was doing. He came in the east entrance at 2:17 p.m., Park said, turning a monitor toward her. She could see the time-stamped footage. Marcus at the door, looking up at the atrium ceiling with the expression of someone assessing a location. He walked 3 full circuits of floors 1 through 3 before going to the 4th floor. He was mapping exits, she said. Her voice was level. Months of practice. Park looked at her with something that wasn't quite surprise, more like a calibrated respect. Yes. That's what I thought. How long have you been watching him? Since he entered. My afternoon officer flagged him. We profile behavioral patterns. Someone moving that methodically through a retail space without purchasing or stopping is either security adjacent or has a different purpose. He paused. We see this type of behavior occasionally. Usually preceding an incident. She wrapped her hands around the water bottle. He drove 7 hours to find me. I know. She looked up. He parked in the B2 lot, Park said. I ran the plate after my officer flagged him. The registration comes back to a Marcus Elliott Strauss. Taejeon address. He slid a printed sheet across the table, then stopped halfway. I should ask, do you want to see this? The question landed carefully. Do you want to see this? Not look at this or here's what we found. She recognized the principle underneath it. Information given with consent felt different from information used against you without your knowledge. It was such a precise courtesy that she had to look away for a moment. Yes, she said. She took the sheet. The plate. The registration. A printed still from the parking camera, Marcus's car, a silver sedan she didn't recognize, parked in spot B2-14 since 1:55 p.m. He knew I'd be here, she said. I come here every Saturday. It's routine. He must have, she stopped. He has someone here. Someone who saw me and told him. Park said nothing, but something shifted in his stillness. Not agreement. More like confirmation of a suspicion he had already formed. That's not a guess, she said. He works like that. He always had someone watching me. Friends of his that I thought were my friends too. He'd collect information and then he'd use it later, weeks or months later, when I'd forgotten about it and couldn't defend myself against it. She was surprised by how flat and clinical she sounded. Like reading from a case file about someone else. Therapy had given her that, at least, the ability to describe the thing without collapsing into it. Are you willing to tell me more about him? Park asked. Why? Not defensive. genuinely wanting to know his reason. Because he's still in my building. A pause. And because I don't think he plans to leave the way he should. She told him. Not everything, there was too much for one sitting, too much that still didn't have clean edges. But she told him the relevant architecture. 3 years. An apartment she left without notice because leaving with notice had twice resulted in her belongings being destroyed before she could collect them. A restraining order filed in Seoul that he had violated 4 times with documentation and twice more without her pursuing it because by then she was too exhausted and too frightened and too aware of how small the consequences had been the first 4 times. The move to Busan. The 8 months of quiet that she had let herself, stupidly, she now thought, interpret as safety. Park listened the way certain people listen, without performing it. No nodding. No. Sounds. No completion of her sentences. Just presence and attention, the room holding the information carefully as she placed it there. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. The restraining order, he said. Is it still active? It expired 6 months ago. She pressed her lips together. I didn't renew it because I thought. It doesn't matter what you thought. You had reason to believe you were safe. He said it without judgment, but with a firmness that refused to let her blame the expiration on her own failure of vigilance. It was such a targeted rejection of self-blame that she felt something loosen in her chest. What can you do? She asked. Legally. Right now. Right now, he's on private property and he's done nothing the law will respond to immediately. He touched your arm. He used language designed to coerce. These are real things, but they don't trigger a response fast enough to matter today. He paused. But I can control what happens on this property. I can control where he goes and what he sees and when he's removed. He'll just come back. Yes, Park said. He probably will. She appreciated that he didn't tell her otherwise. She had spent 3 years being told otherwise. He won't come back. He got the message. He's moved on. Every person who had told her that had been wrong, and their wrongness had cost her something each time. This man's willingness to say yes, probably was the first honest thing anyone had offered her in a very long time. She looked at the monitors. At the grids of shoppers moving through the department store below. Marcus was in there somewhere, recalculating. He's going to try to wait me out, she said. He knows I have to leave eventually. I know. So what do we do? Park turned to one of the junior officers and spoke briefly. The officer nodded and reached for a radio. Park turned back to her. I'm going to show you something, he said. And I want you to understand that what I'm about to share didn't come to me today. Some of this came to me 20 minutes after he walked through those doors. He pulled up a second camera feed. Timestamped earlier, 2:34 p.m. An upper floor corridor near the luxury handbag section. Marcus on the screen. Speaking on his phone. And then the camera angle shifted to a different feed, ground floor, main entrance. A second man, younger, Korean, entering at 2:39 p.m. Looking around. Making eye contact, she realized, with the exit camera directly, a tiny, involuntary acknowledgement of where he was. He's not alone, Park said. She felt the cold come in again. The specific cold of understanding that the situation was larger than the shape she'd assigned it. The second man has been on the 3rd floor since you came upstairs, Park continued. Near the children's section. He's been watching the stairwells. Watching the exits. Marcus was the front. This other man, unknown, unnamed, was the backup. She had thought she was in a one-on-one situation. She was in an orchestrated one. Okay, she said. Her voice didn't shake. She found that remarkable. Okay. What do you need from me? And Park Sung-joon looked at her across the table, and something in his expression shifted, not softening exactly, but opening, the way a door opens that has been a wall for a very long time. Nothing, he said. Right now, I just need you to stay in this room. Then he stood, adjusted his jacket, and said, "Don't open that door unless it's me." He walked out. And Jisoo sat in the glow of 40 camera feeds, watching the man who had already decided to intervene prepare to do it. She didn't know yet what Park Sung-joon had done before this job. She didn't know the decade he'd spent before retail security. She didn't know what he understood about men like Marcus that went beyond procedure and protocol. She didn't know that the one sentence he'd spoken downstairs had been chosen very, very specifically. She was about to find out why. Park Sung-joon had a rule. He had carried it with him from the time he was 26 years old and working perimeter security at a diplomatic compound in Seoul, then into 7 years with a private protection firm, then into the quieter work he'd chosen after everything that had happened in 2019, a story he didn't tell in full to anyone, not even people he liked. The rule was one warning. Not because he believed in theatrical ultimatums. Not because he'd seen too many action films. Because in his experience, a man who needed a second warning had already decided not to hear the first, and everything that happened after that was a negotiation conducted in a different language. He had watched Marcus Strauss for almost an hour. He had watched him the way he used to watch principals, the people he was paid to protect, learning their rhythms, their micro-expressions, the small behavioral tells that made them predictable. He had reverse-applied the same skill to a threat, which it turned out was easier, because threats were less self-aware than protected persons. Threats believed they were invisible. Marcus believed he was invisible. He found him on the 3rd floor, near the children's section, exactly where he expected. The second man, young and nervous, pretending to examine a display of stuffed animals, was 30 feet from Marcus and both of them were watching the stairwell exit. Park approached Marcus directly. Not from behind, from the front, slightly off-center, so that Marcus saw him coming and had time to arrange his expression. "Mr. Strauss," Park said in English. Marcus turned, and Park watched him recalibrate, a tiny reorganization of his face toward the polite and bewildered mask. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "No." Park stopped at a comfortable distance. Not aggressive. Not retreating. The distance of a conversation between equals, which was a lie, but a useful one. "I'm the head of security for this facility. I wanted to speak with you personally rather than have my officers manage this." "Manage what?" The smile, warm-edged and hollow. "Your presence here has been noted and logged since you arrived. Your vehicle information has been recorded." The gentleman near the stuffed animals, Park didn't look toward him, but Marcus's eyes flickered, and that told Park everything about how prepared Marcus was for the information that someone else saw the same things he did. His presence has also been logged. Marcus said nothing for a moment. "I haven't done anything," he said. "No," Park agreed pleasantly. "You've been very careful. You're the kind of man who is always very careful about doing exactly as little as possible." He paused. "I want to make something clear to you, and I'll only say this once, so I'd like your full attention." Something happened in Marcus's face. The smile remained, but its foundation shifted, the way a building shifts before the settlement becomes a crack. He was used to being read. He was not used to being read this quickly and this accurately by someone who had no apparent reason to be invested in the situation. "The woman you're looking for is not going to come out of this building through any exit that you're monitoring." Park spoke with the measured flatness of someone delivering a weather report. "Your associate will be escorted from the premises in the next 4 minutes by my officers. You will be escorted from the premises at the same time. Your vehicle will be noted as a flagged plate in our system, and any return to this property will result in immediate police notification with full behavioral documentation from today's visit attached." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's an interesting speech." "It's not a speech. It's information. You don't know anything about what's between me and Jisoo. You don't know what she's told you and how much of it is." "It doesn't matter," Park said. The simplest 3 words. And he let them sit there, because they were completely true and Marcus had no response to truth delivered without heat. Marcus was built for emotional escalation. He was built for rooms where someone was already half unraveled when he arrived. A room with no escalation available, a man who genuinely did not care about Marcus's narrative, was the one room he hadn't prepared for. Marcus tried anyway. She manipulates people. She has a history of. Mr. Strauss. The name again. Quietly. Marcus stopped. I've been in this profession for a long time, Park said. I've stood in front of men like you before. I want you to understand that I'm not speaking to you from anger. I'm speaking to you from experience. He looked at Marcus the way you look at a fixed point on the horizon. Men who pursue women who have left them, who drive 7 hours, who come with a second man for coverage, those men tell themselves a story about love or closure or justice. The story doesn't matter. The pattern matters. The pattern ends badly. Always. It ends badly for the woman first, and then it ends badly for the man. A pause. I'm offering you a way to leave this building today and have today be the end of it. Marcus stared at him. And for just a moment, a fraction, a sliver, something behind the warm-edged hollow smile flickered. Not remorse. Not exactly. Something more primitive. The animal recognition that it had walked into a space where the power structure didn't work in its favor. I'll need to think about my options, Marcus said. You have 4 minutes, Park said. Then my officers will assist you. He turned and walked back toward the elevator. He didn't look back. He never looked back, he'd learned that from a mentor 20 years ago. Looking back told the other person their response was important to you. He didn't need Marcus's response to be important to him. He needed Marcus to leave. He took out his radio. Unit 3, 3rd floor north, assist the male near display 3C to the east exit. Professionally. He clicked off and pressed the elevator button. Unit 1, north parking lot. B2-14, silver sedan. I want an officer visible near that vehicle when the subject reaches it. The elevator opened. He stepped in. On the ride down, he thought about the thing he hadn't told Jisoo yet. The thing that had come to him not 20 minutes after Marcus walked through the east entrance, but 6 minutes after, when he'd pulled the behavioral flag and run the standard background, and found something that wasn't in the database she would have access to. Something that Marcus didn't know he'd left in Busan before. Something from 10 months ago. A complaint, never formally processed. A woman at a hotel in Houndie. A similar situation, similar mechanics, the finding, the cornering, the calculated whisper quiet pressure. She had declined to press charges. She had, as women in these situations often do, calculated the cost of pressing charges against the cost of walking away, and found the math unbearable. But the report existed. Incomplete, unsigned by the complainant, but logged in the precinct system by the responding officer who had believed her and been frustrated by the math she'd made. Park had a contact at that precinct. He had made one phone call from the security office while Jisoo was looking at the camera feeds. The contact had been very interested. The elevator doors opened to the ground floor, and Park stepped out, and he allowed himself, just briefly, just for the length of a breath, the thing that he almost never allowed, satisfaction. Not yet. Not until Marcus's car left the lot. But close. He walked back toward the operations center. He knocked twice before opening the door, because that was also something you did for a person who had spent 3 years learning to be afraid of doors opening without warning. Jisoo looked up from the monitors. He's leaving, Park said. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. And the other man? Already outside. She nodded. Opened her eyes. And he saw it then, not relief yet, which would come later in its own time, but the precise specific thing that precedes relief, the body's first tentative decision that the immediate danger is past. The shoulders, dropping a centimeter. The jaw, unclenching by a fraction. The return of color to a face that had been controlled into pallor. What did you say to him? She asked. Park sat down across from her again. He thought about the question. I said what needed to be said. She waited. He looked at her for a moment. At the careful steadiness she was holding herself with. At the intelligence in her eyes, the deep, tired, unbroken intelligence of a person who has survived something that was designed to break them. I also said it once, he added. Something moved across her face. It took him a moment to identify it, because it was unfamiliar in this context. In this room. In these conversations. It was something close to a smile. Not the one she wore as armor. Something smaller. Something that lived underneath that one. "There's something else," he said. "Something I need to tell you before Marcus's car is out of the lot, because what happens after this point will move faster than today." She looked at him. 10 months ago, he said, there was another woman. The smile disappeared. But her eyes went somewhere else entirely, somewhere sharp and certain and burning, the look of a person who has always known they weren't the first, who has always suspected the pattern extended beyond the edges of their own experience, and who is hearing the confirmation of that suspicion for the first time from someone with the documentation to prove it. "Tell me," she said. So he did. And the room held it, carefully, the way the right kind of room holds things. Outside on the monitor, a silver sedan backed out of space B2-14 and moved toward the exit ramp. Neither of them watched it go. 3 weeks later, the conference room at the Busan Western District Police Precinct was smaller than she had expected. She had expected something formal and slightly hostile, the way these rooms always felt in her experience, the procedural distance, the forms, the sense of being processed rather than heard. She had prepared herself for it. She had worn her gray blazer, the one that made her look like she expected to be taken seriously, and she had brought her own copy of every document in organized chronological order because she had learned long ago that organizations don't protect people who show up unprepared. Detective Yuan was not what she expected either. She was short and compact and moved through the room with the efficiency of someone perpetually 40 minutes behind schedule, but she sat down across from Jisoo and gave her the kind of attention that made the room feel like it had contracted to just the two of them. "You understand what we're building toward," Detective Yun said. It wasn't a question. "A pattern case," Jisoo said. "Stalking with coordinated assistance. Cross-regional." "Yes." Yun glanced at the file in front of her, the one Park Sung-joon had helped Jisoo assemble, calling in the contact at the precinct, walking with her through the documentation of all 4 confirmed violations of the original restraining order plus the hotel incident, the behavioral log from the department store, the footage, the plate records. A case built not on emotion, which evaporated, but on evidence, which stayed. "And the woman from Houndy has agreed to speak with us." Jisoo felt it then, the first real breath since that Saturday at Latte. Deep and genuine, the kind that goes all the way to the bottom. She had found the woman from Houndy herself. Park had given her the contact, carefully, with the woman's consent already established. He'd reached out first, explained the situation, asked if she would be willing to speak with Jisoo. She had said yes. Her name was Chai-won. She was 31 years old and taught primary school and had spent 10 months telling herself that declining to press charges meant she had chosen peace. When Jisoo called her, Chai-won had been quiet for a long moment. Then she had said, "I didn't think anyone would ever call me about this." The two of them had met at a cafe in Nampo. They had talked for 4 hours. Jisoo had cried twice and Chai-won had cried once and neither of them had apologized for it, and by the end they had exchanged phone numbers and Chai-won had said, carefully, "I think I want to try. If you're doing it, I think I want to try." That was week 2. Week 3 was this conference room. Detective Yun slid a document across the table. He was served this morning. Emergency Protective Order, Cross-Regional. This covers Busan and Seoul both. The violation threshold is different under the pattern statute. First breach carries criminal penalty rather than a fine. She looked at Jisoo steadily. He's going to lawyer up. His attorney will argue the department store interaction was voluntary contact on your part. We're going to argue that a woman who says, "I don't know this man," to a security officer and retreats to the operations center for safety is not making voluntary contact. We have the footage. We have the audio from the lobby camera that caught the elbow touch. She paused. We have a very good case. His second man, Jisoo said. The one downstairs. We know who he is. Former colleague of Mr. Strauss. He's been interviewed. He's not as committed to this situation as his friend is, now that there are legal consequences attached to it. Yun's expression carried a certain dry precision. He was cooperative. She drove home alone. She sat in the parking garage of her building for 10 minutes before going inside, not because she was afraid, but because she needed the quiet. The private space to process. She thought about the last 3 weeks in sequence, the way a person reviews footage, looking for the moment things change direction. The charcoal suit. The cologne bottle. The one sentence. You are going to let go of her arm, and you are going to leave this floor. She had thought about why that sentence specifically. Why not is there a problem or this woman needs assistance or sir, I need you to step back. Those were the sentences you used when you wanted to be careful, when you weren't sure, when you were managing a situation at arm's length. The sentence Park used was different. It didn't ask. It didn't suggest. It described a future that was already decided, in the past tense of an inevitable event. You are going to. Not you should or you need to or you must. You are going to, as if it had already happened and the present was simply catching up. She had asked him about it, later, in the second week. They had started meeting for coffee on Tuesday mornings, which had begun pragmatically. She needed to review footage with him, he needed her to confirm identifications, and had continued because neither of them had manufactured a reason to stop. He was not a talkative man. She had learned to understand the quality of his silences, which varied considerably. There was the professional silence of someone thinking through a problem. There was the watchful silence of someone taking in a room. And then there was, this she had discovered slowly, carefully, testing the edges of it, the comfortable silence of someone who was simply present and did not feel the need to fill space. The sentence, she had said. The one in the store. Why those words? He had wrapped his hands around his coffee cup and considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything. Men like that operate on the assumption that people will negotiate, he said. Everything for them is negotiation. They offer something, they ask for something, they apply pressure when they don't get it. The language of warning is language they already know how to redirect. He paused. So you don't warn them. You tell them what's happening. Present tense. You remove the negotiation entirely. Another pause. It only works if you mean it. She had thought about that. Did he know you meant it? Yes. How? He had looked at her across the cafe table, and she had seen the thing she sometimes saw in his expression, the door that was opening, slowly, over the weeks, that had been a wall for a long time. Because I did. Mean it. She had known, then, what she suspected she had known since the operations center. Since he had knocked twice before opening the door. She got out of the car. She took the elevator to her apartment and set her bag down and stood at the window that looked out over the southern part of the city, the lights of the harbor, the dark edge of the water, the long quiet line of the coast. Her phone buzzed. A text from Park, Yun called. Said it went well. She typed back, it did. A pause. Then, good. She looked at the word on her screen. The specific economy of it. The way it carried, in that single syllable, something it didn't technically say, good that you were okay, in there. Good that it went the way it should. Good that the thing I decided to involve myself in 3 weeks ago is resolving the way it deserves to resolve. Just, good. She thought about the woman who had pressed her back against a perfume display 3 weeks ago. The 90 seconds of calculation. The careful smile worn like armor. The name in his voice, and what his voice had always done to her with just that name. She thought about Chaiwon, who had said, I didn't think anyone would ever call me about this. She thought about the case file Detective Yun was going to take to a judge this week, built from 4 cross-regional violations and 1 behavioral log and 1 cooperating witness and the testimony of a head of security who had watched a man map exits for 40 minutes and decided, without being asked, without it being his responsibility in any technical sense, that the right thing to do was stay close. She typed, thank you. For all of it. For the coffee and for the file and for. She stopped. Reconsidered. Deleted it. Typed instead, the thing you said in the store. It worked because you meant it. I think I finally understand what that means. To mean something enough that people can feel it. She sent it. She waited. His reply took 4 minutes, which was about average for him. She had learned to find the pace soothing, the absence of instant response, the sense of a person on the other end actually thinking rather than performing immediacy. When it came, it said, "You meant things too." For years, alone. That's not nothing. She stood at the window for a long time. The harbor lights moved on the water. A container ship moved slowly through the outer channel, lights strung along its length, enormous and patient in the dark. She had built a life here in 8 months. A small one, careful and deliberate, assembled from necessity rather than joy. A job. A coworker who was becoming something like a friend. A Saturday routine that had felt like safety until it hadn't. She was going to build a different kind of life now. She didn't know all the shapes of it yet. But she knew some things with the certainty of someone who has been genuinely afraid and has learned to distinguish it from safety now that safety was real and present and available. She knew that the protective order was just paper, but that paper had teeth now that it hadn't before, and those teeth were attached to documentation and witnesses and a detective who believed her and a former colleague of Marcus's who had discovered, under mild legal pressure, that his loyalty had limits. She knew that Marcus would try something else, eventually, because that was the pattern, but that she would meet it differently this time. Not alone. Not without documentation. Not in a situation where her word was the only thing on the table. She knew that Chaiwan was going to come to Busan next weekend, and they were going to have dinner at a restaurant neither of them had been to, and they were going to talk about things that weren't Marcus and also things that were, and both kinds of conversation were going to matter. She knew that a man in a charcoal suit had watched a threat for 40 minutes and then spoken once, and that the once had been enough, and that she was still thinking about what it meant to mean something that completely. She put her phone down on the windowsill. She thought about tomorrow. About the specific, ordinary fact of it. A day where nothing extraordinary would probably happen. Where she would go to work and come home and eat something and sleep without the familiar dread that had become so embedded in her nighttime routine that she'd stopped noticing it as an aberration. She thought about what it would feel like when she finally noticed its absence. The harbor was dark and moving and enormous and entirely indifferent to her, the way large bodies of water are indifferent to everything small and human that happens at their edges, the grief, the fear, the slow rebuilding, the one sentence that changed the geometry of a Saturday afternoon and sent a different kind of future cascading forward from it. She picked up her phone one more time. She typed, Tuesday morning. Same place? She put it down. Across the city, in a security operations center she now knew the layout of by heart, a man who spoke once when it mattered looked at his phone. And typed, yes.